Welcome to the Worlds of Possibility podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kopp, CEO of Worlds, where we're creating the AI platform that's bringing AI-based automation into the physical operations of the world's largest companies. In this podcast, we're taking an exciting journey into the minds of exponential leaders who are not just leading, but defining and transforming the world's greatest companies. We'll be exploring what makes them who they are, what drives them to push the boundary of what's possible, and what sparks their insatiable desire for greatness. Through some very deep and I hope meaningful conversations, we'll unlock the secrets behind their leadership prowess and see what's empowering them to consistently redefine the status quo. So buckle up and join us for an enlightening exploration into new worlds of possibility through the minds of some of our greatest leaders. Awesome. Welcome to the Worlds of Possibilities podcast, where we engage with some of the world's most capable innovators and creators and learn about their journey and what they've learned along the way. My co-host today is Chris Rohde, my three-time partner in crime, business partner. And our guest today is Lee Slezak, the SVP of Technology at Leonard Homes, who's had just an amazing career, continuing to have an amazing career. We're going to talk today with Lee about his journey. So thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So Chris and I were looking at your bio, and it's kind of amazing. I mean, you started HP.
Yep.
So the company that really started Silicon Valley.
Yep.
You were there for
26 years.
26 years.
26, yeah.
And then you go to Tyson Foods,
Yep.
the second largest producer of protein in the world.
Yep.
And now you're at Leonard Homes, and it's the second largest home builder in the world.
Absolutely,
So this is kind of amazing. What's that?
Very cool career. Well, and I tell you, my career at HP, I didn't start as an engineer or a manager. I started in a silicon wafer fab.
Oh, no kidding.
I was a process operator, so my job was in a fab, pushing buttons, wearing a bunny suit, the whole deal. So I really started from the ground up at HP, and so I got to see all kinds of different things, everything from silicon wafer fabs to inkjet manufacturing to then corporate services and IT. So it was quite a ride there.
And you were there in the heyday. Wow.
I was. Right when I joined, inkjet had really just started taking off in the home. And it was really amazing because you could start doing color prints at home and then eventually photographs. And it got to the point when we were in a position that we couldn't keep cartridges in the stores. I mean, the biggest metric we had was how many factories could we build, how much equipment could we buy, to keep up with the volumes. It's exciting.
Wow. So what's kind of propelled you along the journey? Like you're at HP, I mean, that would have been a career for most people just in and by itself, and you're taking on more. What kind of brought you to the next one and the next one? Like, is it the problem that you're solving, or what draws you to the next opportunity? Like,
I mean, I think it's a combination of things, like most people. I like to go places that, frankly, are a little messy. Places that have an opportunity to drive transformation to where I can make a difference and I can learn and I can grow, but that I can also help people and help them grow. I think really probably the hallmark of both HP and Tyson was the opportunity I had to impact others and to give them opportunities. Because, when I was at HP, I started from the ground and worked my way up. And my whole career was really probably completely, example after example of somebody opened a door for me. Somebody said, hey, I think this guy can do it. And I had to run through the door, but they had to open it. And so I think that's a big part of me and my DNA is, what I feel like my opportunity is. The tech, I love it, right? I mean, it's something I immerse myself in. I'm super curious about new tech, but a lot of it too is just giving people the opportunity, because it's just, to me, one of the most rewarding things I could ever do.
Is culture something you bring with you, or is it when you get to a new place, is it there and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to bring some aspect of the culture with you. I think that both Tyson and HP, I had the fortune of working, and now Lennar, I had the fortune of working under some of the same leaders. And part of that culture is how do we drive performance in the good and help people strive to be the best they can be. And I think getting out of the way, making sure that there aren't roadblocks and just turning people loose. That's the way you got to do it. Because, in these big companies, it can be often a challenge for people to be innovative because there can be so much red tape. There can be so much process that it gets in your way. And, at all three of these places, at HP, I led what was called an innovation team. When I went to Tyson, we called it the emerging tech team, and we're calling it the same thing at Lennar. So it's really about how do we take advantage of what's brand new in the industry and apply it to those businesses.
That's awesome, because we always think about culture, that part of it is creating the environment for people to unlock, and that's a big part of it.
I think just get out of the way. That's what people do their thing.
Smart people get out of the way, exactly right.
Exactly.
It's crazy. I mean, a big shift also from a personal perspective. I mean, right? You went from Austin, right, to Fayetteville, to now you're in Miami.
Now I'm in Miami.
Right?
Yep. So, and even before Austin, I was in Corvallis, Oregon. And that's where inkjet was invented. We HP went through some consolidations, and I got the opportunity to go to Austin. It was great to go to a big city and to experience that and the Texas heat. That was something new to me coming from Oregon. The summer I moved, there were 100 days in a row over 100 degrees, and that was a shocker.
Wow, that's the wrong year.
And then I took the job at Tyson, and I was back into small rural areas again. And now we're in Miami, and it's actually, I've only been there a couple of weeks, but it's amazing. And my wife is thrilled, which is great. And it's just a beautiful place to be.
That's awesome.
It's turned into a really cool area for business. I think it's really been the last 10 years, too. Miami is a real hub, I think, even for the Americas. They're kind of calling it the hub for the Americas.
Well, I think one of my coworkers' wife mentioned it's a lot less like a U.S. assignment, and it's almost more like an expat assignment there, because it's such a diverse international city. And I need to learn Spanish, so it will really help, because it's just so diverse there, and it's exciting. It's really, really exciting.
So you kind of have a front row seat to, I'm thinking, like the last 20 years of what's been happening with technology and innovation, but it seems like we're on a really accelerated path now with what's happening with AI. Now, we've seen AI since the 60s, but really the last 10 years and really the last 7 months, just kind of everything's accelerated. So from where you're sitting, what you've seen over the years, is this really the time where AI is going to stick and we're going to continue up this massive incline, or is there another AI winter coming and this is just another one of those?
I don't know. I think you think about the hype cycles and the trough of disillusionment and all the other kind of artifacts that Gartner and everybody else comes out with. I tend to think this one's going to stick personally, because I see whether it's in computer vision or NLP, and then these large language models, I think the impact is being felt now not just by the technologist, but by anybody who can sit in front of a screen and suddenly ask questions and get much more kind of verbose and rich answers that sometimes are pretty good,
It also seems like the environment's different now. Like we finally have the compute's there, the AI's there, the data's there. Like we have all the pieces now. Is that?
I think it's huge. I mean, I think the way I look at it is, in my mind, cloud was the last big revolution that we saw across the industry. And I think a lot of people didn't understand the impact early on. But then when you start to look around and you realize that anybody can go toe to toe with a big multinational in terms of infrastructure and compute power and storage, and then just all the tooling that's there with such low upfront costs, it's all consumption based. I think that was huge. And now I see, and I don't think it's the large language models that have done it. I think that's what's pushed us over the top. I think that is really a culmination of a lot of different types of AI, but it was the one that people could really connect with. Because, you think of computer vision, people see, their iPhone, they take a picture, they see a bounding box. I don't think they always realize that that's AI.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And with this, it's front and center. And so I see this generation and this time with AI, I think this is the next shift in the industry for sure.
I agree with you. I think the pieces are there, and now it's
the access is completely different than when it's been, right?
Everything's democratized now. You don't need a data scientist to take advantage of
That's
this.
right.
And even the cloud providers are throwing stuff in now. I mean, look at some of the things that Microsoft's done with their Copilot. At least we've seen in the previews where, hey, create me a slide deck that looks professional, and it does. It's just incredible.
I saw just yesterday. There's using ChatGPT, one of the plugins is just a PowerPoint creator.
Yeah.
Just talk about what you want your slides to, then bam, there they are.
Yeah. I mean, I even think with even descriptive analytics, I think, the days of somebody sitting behind a whether it's a Click or a Tableau or a Power BI, I think those are all changing too, because I think users are going to be able to describe the analytics and the insights they want, and then the machine's going to be able to come back with it.
You start to wonder what the world's going to look like that now that language is the interface.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Or programming language, right?
English is the new programming language. Yeah.
Exactly. The whole prompt engineering, and even on the flip side, which is almost, in my opinion, a little recursive, where you have now software engineers asking things like GPT, write me some code that does X or Y or Z. Yeah. That kind of hurts your brain a little bit when you think about it.
Yeah.
So is that threatening, do you think, let's talk about programmers for a second. So you're a person who's managed programmers your whole life, so now there's technology. Is it an elevation where they can start from a different place now, where we could start with language, get a certain point in my code, and I can now add on top of that, or is it threatening, like to the point where they're replaced?
I think there's always going to be some group of people who unfortunately may feel threatened by some new advancement or a piece of technology, but the reality to me is I've never worked in an organization where we didn't have enough work.
Yeah.
That's right. The last organization that I led, I couldn't hire fast enough. I couldn't staff, half the roles that I wanted because the talent just didn't exist. And so we went to places where we could get people. We went to India, we went to Portugal, we went everywhere just to find smart people. And I think some of these language models they give you that edge, right? And I think you have to be careful to look at what they give you. Yeah. Because you could take risks you're not, sure about or unaware of. But I think it's an accelerator more than anything else.
And what you give them, right?
That's the key, right? Nothing's for free, right? So I think if you think that you're going to give that machine a bunch of information and it's just going to stay there. No, it's going to be shared by everybody else. So you got to watch that too.
That's right. Interesting, right? We've had this trend of, and you've seen it across your entire professional career, right? Where does the compute live?
Yeah.
Right? It's on site and then it's off site and it's kind of ebb and flow. And most recently was the flight to cloud, right? Now we're seeing going back to not only on site, but really to the edge, right? And maybe what are you seeing in
Look, this is always, when I was at Tyson, this was always a big challenge for us because, Edge to Tyson was a manufacturing plant, it was a processing facility to manufacture food. And it was pretty uncommon to have one of those facilities in a big metro area with great connectivity. So one of the things that we always had to design in was, okay, how are we going to manage not only the latency, but the bandwidth that we can get in and out of that facility, because it would be really easy, especially in the analytics space with big data, to completely saturate the network going into one of these facilities, or you could have it disconnected for some period of time. And so I think there are a set of use cases, and I think they're really valid, where you need that compute disconnected, and maybe it's occasionally connected, or maybe it's connected at will, but it's not always on in terms of back driving up to the cloud. And I think both the southbound and the northbound traffic is really key. So I do see that coming. You look at the company I was with, HP is now HPE. They're going huge into the edge, and they seem to be very successful with their GreenLake product and others that really provide that whole ecosystem of kind of a data center. And Amazon has a similar product where it's basically cloud at the edge, and you can use a lot of the same services. And if you get into something like Kubernetes, then you're completely portable. You can just drop it wherever you've got compute. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Do you think the expansion of IoT in recent years is also kind of hastening or at least pushing it faster back towards the edge?
I do. I think that I used to, and now again get the privilege to work for someone. The CTO that I work for, his name's Scott Spradley at Lennar. He was at Tyson. He was at HP. And one of the things that Scott will tell you is, in his view, with enough data, you can solve any problem. And I think with the IoT devices, all of the sensors, whether it's video sensors or other types of telemetry you can get from all of the real world things out there, I do think we're getting to that point where you can solve any problem. You just have to be able to manage it and consume it from data to insights. That's the key. But I think IoT is a big driver for that.
Do you think in the end it's hybrid though? Like there's always going to be a need for cloud and edge?
I do, especially whether it's something where you have some kind of regulatory restrictions where you can't be on some sense of public cloud, or if it's due to the environment where you're operating. Or, look, I mean, the edge could be a plane. The edge could be a drone. The edge could be any number of things depending on the sector that you're in. And I think it'll always be some form of hybrid. And I think also, I think you're going to see some normalization of costs, because I think, one of the challenges I had when I was at Tyson is managing that cloud spend, because it is so easy to consume. Before you know it, you start looking at your spend, and it's like, oh my gosh, we need FinOps, we've got to do something to control the cost.
We hear about that a lot.
There was this funny story. There was an engineer that worked in my organization, and he made a mistake on some of his code. And so one of the directors that used to work for me got him a shirt that said, I spent $135,000 in 10 minutes, and it was,
that's right.
It happens, and you've got to watch those kind of things. And I think that will also be a driver to have people really rationalize it and figure out what makes sense. It's not just because it's there, is it the right thing for you?
Maybe picking the right problems.
Exactly.
You mentioned with enough data, you can solve any problem, right? But the question is, how do you choose the right things to go after, right? Do you have kind of rules of thumb in terms of the
Yeah, I mean, look, I obviously you've mentioned my background. I come from big enterprises, is where I've spent my career, and especially in the data and analytics space, we typically look for a 10x return. It's people think, wow, that seems really huge, but I can tell you that some of the things that we did at Tyson, just over a 2-year period, we returned over $2 billion back to the company in the bottom line, based on savings that we were able to put in place and capabilities that we were put in place, simply because there were processes that weren't efficient, but we could put in the right tech and the right AI to be able to correct the outcomes of some of those manual business processes and fix problems before they even happened. And so, I look for returns. I look for, can it scale? Can we manage it? Because I think that's another challenge, especially when you get into the AI space. Look, I've managed a number of data science teams, and oftentimes it's a solution looking for a problem. We have really, really smart people, and the consumers of that tech don't always understand it. And if you can't bridge that gap to communicate what the value is and what the outcomes could be, sometimes our smart technical folks will go build things that are cool, but they don't give you the returns, or you can't maintain them because they are too costly, or they're too maintenance intensive, or whatever it might be. So I think you do have to pick the right problem. I think it's key.
It's like so we hear every day now. It's all about automation, and AI is behind a lot of that. Not all of it, but a lot of that. Where is AI hardest to implement? Is it because there's machine processors, there's people, there's processes with people, there's lots of different processes inside of it. Where is it hardest to implement, an automation strategy?
I mean, in my experience, change management and people are always the toughest thing.
Okay.
It gets, I say, more and more complex the more you're allowing AI to kind of drive equipment or to drive physical motions of objects in the real world because of safety and other things. But I think convincing the human beings to trust the machine and to be willing to adapt their business process, to take advantage of that and not see it as a threat, like you mentioned earlier, I think is key. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest challenges that I saw in my last role. Was we had, I'd say, some of the best tech in the planet. I mean, we had one of the best tech stacks out there. We built it from scratch. We were able to come in and do a lot of greenfield work, but we just had a heck of a time with the adoption. And I think really spending a lot of time, not only up front, but all along that journey with the consumers of the tech, that's key. To me, that's the biggest thing. You got to get those wins with people. So
change management, is it different with AI? Because it seems to me like change management's always been something with technology, right? So technology is always replacing somebody, but it's also, history has been that it's always given us more jobs than it's taken away. And you talked about this kind of trough that we're in right now, with such a massive change with AI right now, and perhaps a trough of disillusionment in front of us. How does that make change management? How does that affect change management?
I think it, again, to me, it depends on somebody's outlook. If they see technology as an enabler, as a true benefit, they're much more likely to adopt it. But
where does that come from? Is that from you? Is that from?
What do you mean?
Well, you said when people see it as an enabler,
Well, it needs to come from people like me and others that are in the kind of positions that I have. Because if you're not that evangelist who is really going to explain it and articulate the value, it's really going to be tough, because I think people will see some of these things as threats.
Yeah.
And, even at Tyson, they've taken on, we had 3 kind of core strategy elements at Tyson. One was standard global systems and processes, right? The bread and butter for IT, you got things like SAP, Workday, kind of the big things, right? Yeah. The second one was data science, prescriptive, descriptive, kind of predictive analytics. And the third was physical and robotic automation. Those were the 3 pillars that we were driving towards. And, the first one, that's traditional change management. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's understood. I think the data and analytics one, you've got an interesting space, because you've got a lot of heavy power users in every company that want to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And then you've got, others who can't or don't want to. And that group that want to do it themselves, the so-called citizens, fill in the blank after, for people that have to manage and are accountable for a lot of those systems and performance and the sprawl after they're done with whatever they've built.
Yeah.
Those things are a little nervous. They're nerve-wracking. So we have to look at how do we govern that in a way that enables them and speeds them up, but at the same time protects the enterprise, so that we don't have 5 answers to the same question and you don't know which one is right. But on the physical automation, I know when one of my peers at Tyson was releasing automation into some of the plants, he did a great job. His name is Chetan Kapoor. He runs automation for Tyson Foods, and he's an amazing guy. One of the things that I learned from him was they did things like personalize some of the robots. They would give them names.
Oh,
they would
anthropomorphize.
Yeah, okay. and they really spent time with the people operating them or changing their job, and it was really all about, look, this is here to help you, so you're not lifting this really heavy box 15 times a day.
Yeah.
You're pushing this button, or you're watching this with a co-robot, or cobot or a robot, and it was. He was very successful, and he continues to be so, just because he spends so much time with the team on the ground.
I think that's one of the shocking things I've heard with robotics and AI in particular, is that people like to interact with AIs, because there's no judgment. Right, from an AI.
True.
Right, but I think it's going to be an interesting transition to watch, like how we evolve with this technology.
I think you're right. I think, it's funny, when I thought about cloud back in the day, it was like, okay, I was working at HP, and at the time our business model was to sell storage and servers and networking. Yeah. And then there was a consumer side of the business, which once I moved out of Inkjet, I was more involved on the enterprise side. But it was a big threat. It was like, oh my gosh, that's going to eat up our market, and frankly, it did, right? And they've shifted most of their business model to edge now, and like I said, they're quite successful at it. But I wish I had the crystal ball for this AI movement, because I just don't see how this is going to end up, because it's just moving so darn fast.
Yeah,
really fast.
Yeah.
You have a lot of young folks, right? Just graduating from school, or early in their careers.
Yeah.
It's going to turn things upside down a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
You have advice for those guys, sitting where you sit now, seeing what you've seen, right? You've seen incredible transition in the tech space, right?
I don't know that the advice I would give changes based on what the current tech, kind of what the hottest tech is right now. My biggest thing is, when I look to bring in people, that are young and just starting out, I want somebody who's smart.
Right on.
It's pretty easy to find. But I want somebody who wants to work. They want to just dive in, and I'm less concerned about how many letters you have beyond your name or what school you went to. That, to me personally, especially given my background, it just doesn't matter to me. But what's important to me is somebody who wants to work hard and learn. Are you curious? Do you really have a lot of questions? And are you bold enough to ask those questions and humble enough to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. And I'm going to ask that question, because it's funny, I used to get this feedback all the time, because when I first started moving up in the ranks in IT and leading people, my style was, I was pretty quiet. I would sit in the room and I would listen, and if I saw the opportunity where I could add value, I'd say something. Otherwise, I was usually pretty quiet. And somebody that I work for said to me, don't be stingy with your thoughts. You're in here for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'd say the same to everybody else. There's not dumb questions. I think there's just people who don't have all the answers. And by communicating and asking those questions, I think it's big. I will say, though, in the AI space, that's especially important, because you've got to be willing to keep up with things. be able to follow the market, see what's going on. And if you're not willing to keep pace with the rate at which the market's going, you're in the wrong business.
It's almost like learning is like you graduate college and that's started.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things you asked me earlier about culture, and it makes me think, a learning-based organization is absolutely key, because that opens up the horizons for people to run faster because they know more.
It's a whole nother topic. We could spend an hour on that.
Yeah.
Like, what could we do to kind of support people in this continuous learning that's going to have to be a part of everyone's job going forward? Like, can we be...
I mean, I think I'll give you some examples of some of the things that we've done that have been real successful. So when I first came to Tyson, you mentioned Scott, our CTO, he'd come up with this concept. He called them Mayflower trips.
Mayflower trips?
Mayflower trips. Because when he first joined Tyson, he said, gosh, there's a lot of really smart people here, but they just haven't been exposed to the rest of the industry. And so what he would do, and once I joined, he decided that it would be my job to do, which was
Very nice.
a lot of fun, really, to be honest with you. But he'd say, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to go visit 4 or 5 different companies in Silicon Valley or wherever they might be. And so we would take usually a few seasoned folks, but more importantly, we would take a lot of the younger folks straight out of school, folks that didn't have a lot of experience, that were just hungry. And we put them on a plane, and we'd go see just these amazing companies, and we'd go to big companies too. We'd go to Google, we'd go to AWS's. We had the luxury of company planes at Tyson, and so we actually flew from Northwest Arkansas to Seattle, met with Amazon all day, and flew back the same day.
Wow.
And you put a group of really smart people on something like that, a trip like that, they come back energized and excited because they see what's out there. And then you get the red tape out of the way, and you say, all right, go innovate, and it's not like, hey, it's Engineering Friday where I'm going to give you 4 hours. No, it's like,
for real.
go do it, and we'll support you.
I'm going to steal that. That's really cool. Mayflower trips.
Yeah.
We do something similar. We'll take developers and we'll take them on sales calls and take them out on the road with us so they can hear from the customer. And it's always what you said. They come back with something they didn't expect to get,
Well, and just even the camaraderie that gets built on the team that went on that trip, because undoubtedly something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it might not be pleasant when it happens, or it might be, but it's going to be a story afterwards, and it'll connect those people.
Yeah.
And there are partners out there, that people that tech companies that I've yet to do business with, but I'm extremely close with the team because I have it in my back pocket, because I know what they can do. And now it's like, okay, when that problem comes up, I know who to call.
Yeah.
And it's been really helpful.
So we need to work on the private jet thing.
There you go.
Private jet thing.
There you go.
Would you say it's key?
Very important, obviously.
It helps. It helps. Although I flew out here commercial, so.
Okay. Sorry about that. Have a budget. Well, we like to end on kind of a personal question.
Sure.
So you've accomplished so much, and
Thank you.
You've got a lot more to do. But what's kind of underneath that? This isn't like business strategy or things like that. Like, this is looking at Lee as a person. Like, what makes you who you are? Who made you who you are? Like, was it a parent? Was it a mentor? Was it an event or some experience? But what kind of made you who you are that has you want to do the things you're doing?
Oh, I mean, I'd say a couple of things. My dad's my hero, and
Awesome.
My dad was in the Navy for 20 years, and one of the things I learned from him is to be flexible and open to change, because we moved every 3 years of my life, and that really teaches you a lot. Some things are great, some things you have to kind of unlearn. Like I found myself kind of disconnecting from people after about 3 years because I knew I was going to move. But so that was certainly a factor for me, because he's a super hardworking guy, humble guy, just amazing.
Yeah.
But I would say the other thing, as I got into, whether it was HP or other places, somebody willing to give me a shot. Somebody who would believe in me.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the right credentials, or I wasn't the right level, or I didn't have the right experience. Somebody gave me an opportunity. And I think, I spent 10 years in manufacturing on the ground floor, whether it was an operator or a technician or a non-degreed engineer at the time. I learned a lot because I got to walk in the shoes of the people that eventually I'd get to deliver solutions to. And, there was a funny thing that used to happen at HP all the time when I worked in fabs. If you know anything about fabs, they have white light areas and they have yellow light areas. And it has to do with the photo lithography operations that happen in the yellow light area, so you don't expose basically the film, if you will. And so the joke that everybody used to play was they'd get the new person in and they'd say, okay, here's a manual and clean room paper, and they'd give them a yellow highlighter and said, you need to highlight all of these, and when we're in there, I'm going to ask you questions about them. Well, when you go into a yellow light area, your paper turns yellow because the light is yellow. Your yellow highlighter doesn't show up anymore. And they started to get it, right? You start to get it when you spend just a little bit of time in the environment that is your target environment.
Wow.
And, I think all those things gave me the opportunities and kind of made me, I guess, into the person I am.
That's awesome. So I love what you said earlier about how somebody has to give you a shot.
Yeah.
Somebody has to open the door. It's up to you to go through it, but somebody's opened the door. How do you find those opportunities? Like, do people actually come up to you, or because sometimes people won't ask, right?
Yeah. For me, it's always been about being curious. I think kind of in kind of the working environment, probably one of the first things I did with a technology point of view was I made it to a technician. So I was running experiments for process engineers that were developing new inkjet technologies. And I was really interested in this one piece of equipment, and we had this whole initiative to do statistical process control. So it's kind of the early days of me getting exposed to data. It was all about how do we implement control charts and Deming's rules and all that kind of stuff. And there was this critical piece of measurement equipment, and it wasn't on the network. And it was really expensive at the time. It's still expensive. It was $500,000. It was a combination of a microscope with a camera, with a robotic stage, and it would find features on wafers and it would measure them. It actually ran on DOS. And date myself a little bit, but we wanted it on the network, and the vendor wanted like $100,000 for a network kit. And I said to the engineer I'm working with, it's a DOS computer, I can do it, And after about 45 minutes of moving things around in autoexec.bat and config.sys, I got the right order, got the network drivers loaded, plugged in the card, and $100 later, we were on the network.
That's awesome.
And it's those kind of things that just add to it.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Just real privilege to sit with you, and thanks for sharing your story. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you guys. It's very mutual. I mean, I'm always impressed every time I interact with you. The things you've accomplished and the technology that your company has to offer is just second to none. So thank you.
We're super appreciative.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.